Now we're live. Welcome to my Facebook feed. This is Arnie Buss. I'm a relationship coach, communications workshop leader, and published author. And I am so happy to have as my guest today, Kim Von Berg, a relationship expert. She's a relationship coach. She's been working for many, many years on this. She has certifications out the wazoo. But I know Kim from having also studied with my mentor, Selwa Saeed, and Kim utilizes those communication skills in all of her work. So welcome, Kim.
Oh, welcome. I'm so honored to be here. Thank you, Arnie.
So you've been doing this kind of work for a long time, and I'm just kind of getting started myself. So I'm very happy to have someone who's experienced at this and has a lot of a track record for, having a lot of success with couples and with singles. So maybe we can start by, tell me how did you get into this? What got you interested in helping people in relationships?
Well, there's a bit of a story, and I could take a long time if I told the whole story, but really, I have to say the biggest impetus was Selwa, and the work that you and I learned from her many years ago. Gosh, it's probably been 30 years ago that I was so excited with at that time, my late spouse and I were very much into Selwa's seminars. And we got so excited how it turned our own relationship around, which was sort of on the rocks, that we wanted to be communication trainers or whatever capacity, trainers, coaches, whatever. And then the more we got into it, the more I just thought, gosh, we need a little more maybe psychology. And then I went and got my master's degree. So it's been this whole evolution. And then my spouse passed away in 2008. And prior to that time, we were trying to reach every camp of people. It wasn't just couples. We were doing organizations. We did a lot of nonprofits. We, basically were like consultants, communication consultants. And then we did a lot of things in the realm of every kind of relationship, employer, employee, parent, child, and you name it. But at some point after my spouse passed away, I just decided, I want to pick one thing and get really good at it. And I chose couples, the intimacy of, because it's a very rich subject that I continue to learn in. I don't feel like people call me relationship expert. That's the title. But I really feel like there's always more to learn in the arena of love and intimacy. So anyway, and so I just continue to learn. There's more, like I've been really into attachment theory and all that. And it's just fascinating to me. And I love this career. It's so fulfilling. And I continue to use Selwa's communication skills and teach them with couples and sometimes do workshops. But if it's going to be an intense one, I'm going to refer them your way because you've stayed involved with her work more than I have in the last, 10 years. Yeah.
Oh, wonderful. So how, maybe talk a little bit about how, what kind of work you do with couples.
It varies. To me, the relationship is just like an individual. There's never one exactly the same. Right. So, but I have kind of I would call it my philosophical framework, which is that I really believe that there's two components to look at in a relationship that I try to give equal time to, which is there's the component of, I guess a way to describe it would be your inner landscape. So what makes up the inner landscape of each individual and what they bring to the table in the relationship. And some of that is not so great. I mean, it's involves maybe healing work that needs to be done for there to be healthy interaction.
Sure.
So it's that inner landscape, and then it's skills, relationship skills. And so that I try to also give time to as well, which is also communication skills. Yeah.
What I'm learning, well, I mean, is yeah, communication skills are very important, and yet they're not the only thing. So what are some of the other skills that you help couples, develop?
Yeah, I mean, communication, there's basically you're talking about the skill level or the inner landscape. I'm not sure if you're
Well, either
referencing.
one.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're,
I-
they're they're both important because the one thing that I found about intimate relationships is that they really confront you with your own crap.
They sure do. It's like putting a magnifying glass on it.
Exactly. Yeah, yeah,
I mean, you can think you got all your stuff together. I just sure learned that with my spouse, is that I thought I had done all this therapy and I'd done all these workshops and this and that. But then when you get involved, it just sort of brings it out in the open, stuff that
yeah,
you didn't even know was still there.
yeah.
Yeah. So it's a golden opportunity, but I call it graduate level, right? If in
Absolutely.
your let's say emotional and psychological growth, it's graduate level to go for a healthy, thriving relationship with a
Sure.
beloved.
Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, as far as what I work on, um, one of the things is we look at triggers. So, people invariably are going to get triggered in a relationship. And most of the time, if you're not skilled or you're not getting help or you're not trying to work on yourself, you see it as something that you're going to try to change your partner to stop
Yeah.
doing that. Stop triggering me. But what I do a lot of times with couples is we look at, well, let's look at this as an opportunity.
Mm.
This is getting triggered is usually an opportunity where it's bringing something up, usually that's historic from your
Mhm.
past, that hasn't been fully healed. And your
Yeah.
partner is just kindly pushing that button so
So
that you can
considerate of them.
become aware of that and work on it. Not to say that there may be something that needs to change with the behavior of your
Sure. Yeah,
partner.
no.
Not that that's what skills are about, right?
Yeah.
And setting boundaries and setting limits. Yes, that's one of the skills that needs to happen to have a healthy relationship.
Mhm.
But at the same time, we look at what our part is of how we're triggered, and it's an opportunity. So
Mhm.
there's various modalities and techniques I teach each in the relationship of how to handle when they get triggered and to stay conscious, because
Mm.
I'm using the language of Sower, right?
Sure.
She
Yeah, yeah.
said go unconscious, but we do go unconscious a lot of times when we get triggered.
Mhm.
We just think he's doing
Yeah,
that,
yeah.
she's doing that. Why is she doing that?
Yeah, yeah. Yeah,
Yeah,
we've been I haven't been using that term quite so much. I know Selwa used it, and I, I guess for me it always felt a little judgmental. um, so actually, with Lee and I have used the term aware, loving heart a lot, and so
I
you're either
love
in it or
that.
not in it.
Yeah,
So, and I just found that to be a little less, conscious and unconscious seems a little bit and I
yeah.
know what Selwa's used it wonderfully, and it just when I found when I used that, it didn't land quite so well.
Well, you and I both share the kind of, how should I say, the framework
Yeah.
of knowing that there's different parts to us, and that when we're not relating from the aware, loving heart,
Mhm.
we're coming either from critical parent or wounded child, or it could be other parts, because my NLP, we used to bring out all kinds of parts more than that, but or there's like nuances to what type
Sure.
of the wounded child, or it could be the wounded teenager, it could be a whole bunch of other parts.
Yeah,
But
yeah,
I think that was that old transactional analysis that she brings up,
sure. Yeah,
which
yeah.
I think is a great, easy way to know that, oh, when I'm coming from a place of judgment or wanting to criticize, I'm
Mhm.
probably coming from some critic of some sort,
Mhm.
and
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
not in.
regret. Just,
Wounded child of some sort.
yeah.
And a lot of times it's asking if somebody's reacting in a relationship, let's say they suddenly yell or they suddenly do something that seems like, whoa, where did that come from? When I work with couples, I get them to a place where they trust one another, because you don't want to do this in the beginning.
Yeah.
But at some point, either one of them can ask, what age are you right now? Because a lot of times if you got triggered and a lot of times if we're not conscious, we got triggered, but we do something weird, like we suddenly cuss for no reason or something, I don't know, something. And so then it's the partner saying, sometimes you can get to where they're comical, they're laughing, they're going, oh, there's little Johnny, or, or there's,
Oh.
what is he feeling right now?
Oh,
yeah.
Wonderful. Yeah. Sounds like, so I know recently you moved across the country. So, I mean, have you been able to keep up with your clients, or were you doing things remotely because of COVID, or how does that work?
Well, I would say about 80% of my clients were coming to me live or in person in Carmel. And so I did lose some of those people because they didn't want to convert over to virtual. But I'm having a great time. I'm just learning about Asheville, North Carolina, and the community here is so rich. There's so much to do. So I don't mind that things slow down a little bit, because I know they'll take off again once they start doing workshops and things, which I haven't started doing. But yeah, I got a few clients just by word of mouth, without promoting myself.
Yeah.
Just so I'm loving where I'm at right now. As far
wonderful.
as, yeah. I wouldn't have had time to do an interview with you if I did my normal schedule. Yeah. So I'm doing more interviews and things like that.
Yeah. No, that's great. Well, one thing that intrigued me about your certifications is you have one in calling in the one, which is about how to help single women find their soulmate.
Single men and women.
And men and women.
Yeah,
okay.
anyone.
So what is the how what's the difference in working with people in that genre versus couples, in your experience?
Oh, that's a great question. I think we're focusing, obviously, since we don't have to me, you probably have the same belief system around, I shouldn't assume, but when you're working with couples, there's really 3 entities you're working on. One of the people, the other one, and then the entity of the relationship. And developing the respect of each of them for that entity and how to nurture that relationship. And when you're working with an individual, you're working on, their inner landscape and their relationship with self. And then going from there on how that influences who they're attracting into their lives, if they're getting into dating and giving them the support they need to do that. Yeah. But if we're not conscious of certain patterns that we have or things that we haven't healed, we're going to usually have unhealthy patterns that seem like they're happening to us. Like we keep attracting that guy that turns out to be the addict, or we keep attracting the woman who turns out to be completely self-consumed and narcissistic, or we keep, like various kinds of, and we're like, I thought I did all my homework. I thought I did that. I don't know. Once again, I did it again. So it's looking at what is our part in it, because we're usually unconscious of that. Now, I actually bring in some of that work with couples too. It's a little more subtle because there's more dynamics to work on. Like I was saying, there's a lot to work on. But usually, I mean, this whole thing that I'm saying about negative patterns, sometimes we bring them into our relationship too. So once we get involved with someone, we'll just think, why does he always shut down when such and such happens? Or why every person I've ever picked, they do this, they do that. And oftentimes we're doing something that's contributing to that happening.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. But there's more focus. When I'm working with singles, we focus on that a lot more. Yeah.
So in working with singles, at this point, I've been focusing mostly on individuals in a committed relationship, and not with singles who are kind of searching for the one, as it were.
Right.
But I'm curious of your experience. I mean, how the communication skills play in with singles. I mean, does that, how do you incorporate that kind of work with them?
Well, and it's funny when you were saying, I want to answer that question, but then I
Oh,
was thinking that I probably should mention something else, but I'll do that after I address your question. Yeah. So basically, when you're, like I said, you're unconscious about certain things, or you're not aware that there's something that you're bringing in from your past that's sort of influencing how you interact with people, or just
mhm,
basically the way you live your life, and how you approach people, in relationships in general, but then particularly with dating. Um, some of that affects how we communicate and how we listen,
sure.
how the ability to do the level of listening that you and I have been trained to help people with
Mhm,
is the highest form of listening. And you really have to be emotionally healthy to really sustain being able to
mhm,
do that.
mhm.
You might be able to just sit in Selva's workshop for, one Saturday when there's a lot of pressure to do that. But I mean, as far as sustaining that,
Mhm,
either as a single or in a relationship, it's going to be almost impossible if you haven't healed certain things, and you don't see that there's certain patterns that you have in
mhm,
your communication.
mhm,
So sometimes it's teaching certain aspects of communication skills, both, listening and tracking. I call it the highest level of deep
mhm,
listening.
mhm.
Well, it's also called empathetic listening in many circles, but
Sure. Yeah.
so teaching skills around that actually is important for singles as well, because if you're dating and you don't know how to listen to that level,
Mm.
you're going to miss the red flags if there are some,
Ah,
because people always give you clues, even the biggest con artist.
yeah.
Well, I
Yeah.
probably shouldn't say that,
Well,
because yeah, but I'm just saying,
yeah.
most of the time people tell you who they are if you're paying attention.
Mm. So I mean, do you, like, for someone who's single and dating, then do you teach them about tracking and impact statements?
Absolutely.
Or I mean, I think you have a
Absolutely.
slightly different term for them, but that,
Yeah.
they're the same thing.
Yeah. Yeah. It's the same thing.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I do. Uh-huh.
Because I mean, I guess, for me, I was just sort of imagining, tracking, I think, would be a very useful skill to have when, if you're even on a first date. I mean,
Yes.
uh, it would help you draw the other person out a little more. And then it seems to me that even it's important to kind of establish firm boundaries without being a jerk.
Yes.
But
Without turning someone off. Very
yeah,
true.
yeah. So I mean,
Yeah.
if they're maybe uh, uh, like if you're dating someone and you're on the third date and every date they've been at least 20 minutes late. I mean, then that's
Yeah,
fodder for an
exactly.
impact
Or
statement.
something. Yeah.
Instead of saying, screw this person, heck with them, or, why are you always late?
Yeah,
Instead,
exactly.
give an impact statement. It's our third date, and each time it's been 20 minutes or more after the agree
Yeah.
time, and I'd like to be assured that the times will be kept, something like that.
Oh, that was a beautiful one.
So,
Yeah, I absolutely do teach. In fact, I developed a workshop called communication skills for dating, for conscious dating.
mm, ah,
Yeah. And it's basically what you're saying. Absolutely. So
yeah, that's
what when you asked that question, I don't know, it triggered something that I was like, oh, I need to mention. So if
Okay,
you're
yeah,
okay, I wanted to
oh,
mention something
absolutely, yeah,
else
go.
about, in my training with Catherine Wilbur Thomas, who wrote Calling in the One, and now I'm one of her mentor coaches. And she also wrote Conscious Uncoupling. So she helps people do conscious divorce and conscious, go through. So I have it at both ends. Basically, I joke, I do the beginning, the middle, and the end.
Got all bases covered.
Yeah.
A full
But,
service.
yeah. But in any case, yeah. So one of the concepts that I've been trained in her work, and NLP and some of the other things I've done, is that there's this sense that basically it's when you're having a pattern that you're not liking, either in a relationship or trying to find a relationship, there's this idea that oftentimes we have a hidden self-identity going on. And it could be, I'm not good enough. It could be, I'm unwanted. It could be, and it's like your I should call it self-love identity, because it's relating to love and relationship. Now we get this self-love identity usually in childhood by what happened in what we observed with our parents, or the way we were treated, and sometimes in trauma in childhood.
Sure, yeah.
So if something traumatic happened, like say your dad left in a flurry one day and never came back, as a child, we're not psychologically developed enough, so we believe that it's about us. Everything is sort of revolves around us, so we think, oh, he left because of me. I'm not lovable. Or we make meaning out of it. Now, unfortunately, that never goes anywhere unless we do some healing work. And it usually goes unconscious, so we're not aware that we have that fault. It's false, by the way.
Sure, yeah.
False self-identity around love. And so what happens is when we get involved, or we try to get involved, we try to get out and date or meet someone, or even we get involved, we bring that into our relationship, and it bleeds through. It comes through. And also, I basically do various types of techniques and working with individuals, and even in a couple, I do individual sessions. I always ask to have some individual sessions with each in the partnership, so that we can see if there is a false love identity operating, and replace it with what's true, what's really true. So
what now? I mean, how do you work with? Do you ever encounter individuals who've had significant trauma that may be extreme?
Oh, yes. Yes. And I am not an MFT, or I'm not a psychologist. So I refer people when it's extreme. I definitely refer people to a licensed psychotherapist. Yeah. I call myself a relationship counselor and coach, because I've been doing a lot in the arena of emotional healing work.
Sure.
But I always tell people I am not a licensed psychotherapist. And if it gets to the place, I will refer, I have a whole list of references of people. Yeah.
Yeah, that's good. That's probably something I should do.
Yes.
Yeah, because so far it hasn't been an issue, but I'm sure it possibly can be, where there are things that are kind of I'm just not able to handle. I mean, and not qualified. So I don't want to be offering anything. I mean, and I focus right. I mean, my focus is so much on communication, but then that also tends to lead to some of the inner things, and I don't have. Yeah, I mean, that because it, as you were pointing out, it in order to really like just even track effectively, you need to really be in that aware, loving heart place, and sometimes it's challenging.
Absolutely. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So what kind of you mentioned that you're you're always learning. We're always learning, and right now I'm mostly trying to figure out how to turn this into a more effective business because
Yes.
working with that. But
Yeah. Kudos to you for doing this podcast. It's
yeah,
great.
no. And this is part of that, and
Yeah.
part of it is also trying to you know learn from people who are experienced at it, like yourself, and who've had great success, and are in a similar at least have the communication skills in common. That's you know
Yes.
and
Um, and I just
so
want to commend you, Arnie, for you and Lee for writing the book. Here, I bowled over that you took on that. That's such a feat that you two
oh,
accomplished. I mean, because we know how picky Selma was, and intricate her skills were, and to take that on was just, my hat goes off to you too.
oh yeah,
Yeah,
thanks. It was a labor of I was our what we learned and from Selwa was something was so different and more effective than things that were out there. She was never able to finish her book, um, and then when she passed in 2020, right as COVID was hitting,
right.
and I was hoping to try to get a hold of her notes, but by the time things kind of settled down, I found that they'd sold the house and just everything was gone. so
Oh, yeah.
uh, so
But you probably had 5 million pages of notes from your
yeah,
own.
yeah,
I know I
I
do. I still have like 12 folders full of notes from
yeah,
10 years of intense training with her.
yeah,
Yeah.
and so and Lee, I don't know if you know Lee's story, but
Mhm.
he basically Sel was basically his second mom. so so he kind of grew up with the skills, and then when he started going to the workshops, he's going, oh, that's what that was.
Oh,
But
wow.
yeah, he
Yeah.
is just a delight to work with, and then he was able to bring in a lot of his work with with men and alternative to violence and things like that to kind of address the aware loving heart piece, which is something that I always found challenging when working with Selwa, because she was so much in her heart that like you're mentioning triggers, like
Yeah.
we get triggered and we say, what do I, she said, well, move into your heart. I don't know how to do that. He says, well, just do it. How do I do that? So it's and then what was actually
Well, that's a tough, I commend you guys for taking on, because anger is a big arena. I know a lot of people say, oh no, it's all about sex, or they focus, different therapists have their thing that they think, oh, it's all about this. That's the biggest thing. Well, to me, one of the biggest things I tend to have to work on with couples, at least in the beginning, is how to handle anger in a healthy way.
yeah
And so skills are so helpful, but then also I'd say applying skills to yourself. Like if you want to erupt in anger, hone in. How do you do that? How do
yeah
you
yeah
hone in on the inner self that's going on?
yeah yeah
Yeah.
yeah and that's something that that was something that Selwa never really went into in great depth. So that was something that I've kind of, I'm still finding ways to work with that. And Lee, and again in his work had a lot of wonderful tools to apply to that, and that's what we were able to put into the book. When
Yay.
so
That's
it's
fantastic.
and it was mostly just as a tribute to Selwa, and as a way to just kind of make her work be more concrete and out there. And that's also something that I'm trying to do. And he and I are trying to start the workshops up again.
Yay.
And with this work and other things. Actually, something came up that I'd be curious about your take on. It was actually in working with someone they were complaining about a person, a friend of theirs, who would hog the conversation and just never stop talking, and then wouldn't, she had learned tracking, but she said that they never took a breath. I could never get in there. And it
Not
was like,
even to track them, right?
yeah.
Yeah.
So have you encountered things like that, and how do you work with that?
You mean as far as if one person in a relationship is doing that, where
Yeah,
they're just
yeah.
talking nonstop? And yeah, I remember we had to work on that in Selwa's workshops too, about people talking nonstop. Because, you can track them, but you'll end up with someone that's just, I hate to say it, but like diarrhea of the mouth.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
sometimes no matter how much you track, they're not going to stop.
Yeah.
There's certain, but I would say the more often though is people that have a tendency to talk too much,
Mhm.
um, have never been fully heard.
Mm.
So if you're an excellent tracker, sometimes it works, not always. It
Mhm.
actually works to help them finally, if they feel heard,
Mhm.
sometimes they finally will pause.
Mhm.
And we
Oh,
knew that, we learned
yeah,
that,
yeah,
right? And so I know that was Selwa's message. It means
yeah,
you have to track them better.
yeah.
But sometimes people they have a disorder, actually.
Mhm.
It's an emotional problem, like
Yeah, yeah.
it could be a personality disorder or something. So with those kinds of people, I remember a particular couple in particular, I'm thinking of one, like the wife, she just, that would not stop. And, sometimes you have to set a limit.
Mhm.
You have to say, okay, it's been 20 minutes or whatever,
Yeah, yeah,
and we need to give time to so and so, or this is as the
yeah.
counselor. But even if it's just with you and a person, a
Mhm.
friend who's just talking nonstop, or a sister, or whatever relationship it is, sometimes you need to interrupt. I have
Mhm.
this, sometimes I have to teach with, I hate to say it, but there's like I'm going to sound like I'm generalizing too
Mhm.
much here, but
Yeah.
unfortunately, sometimes in the dating arena with men can sometimes, I think about birds, where they have that
Yeah,
plumage thing,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
like they want, I'm so great because I have this degree and I did this and I did that. Because they're trying to impress the woman, right?
Yeah.
But they'll talk too much and they're not listening or not asking questions of the woman. So I've actually trained, women to say, okay, it's been 10 minutes, and like you give a gentle impact statement.
Mhm.
Gentle. You don't have to, like, I don't know, make them hurt their ego, or, like,
Yeah.
you don't have
Shut
to be,
up.
rude and obnoxious, but you just
Yeah.
say, I'd like there's to be some equality in our
Mhm.
conversation. And I've
Mhm.
heard a lot about you, and I appreciate that. And I think, for us to really know if there's potential here, if we want to date again, it would be nice if there's some equality in how we get to know one another.
Mhm.
Something like that.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, so basically interrupt. I mean, that's yeah.
Interrupt in a
Yeah,
gentle
yeah,
way.
yeah, yeah.
Gentle interrupt.
Yeah, no, yeah, one normally you don't want to do that, but I think in these cases, I would tend to agree that it's
And
something that needs to
my
be
my
done.
what I teach, and like I said, it's not always, sometimes it's reverse. It's the woman that's talking. So
Yeah,
like I said, I'm
yeah, yeah,
overly generalizing. But if one of them doesn't get the hint with that gentle
yeah,
interrupt, that's usually a clue, like on a first date. If they
yeah, oh,
continue to do it, then you're like, I don't know if I'm going to do a second date here."
yeah, exactly. Yeah. So enough about me. Let's talk about you. What do you think of me? You know?
Yes.
So yeah. Well, it is.
We're probably going
I'm
overtime here.
here. We went over a little bit, but it has been an absolute delight to talk to you. I really appreciate you coming in and sharing your experience and wisdom and your work. I mean, this is such valuable work because relationships are really so important, and many of us don't know how to how to work with them. And,
Yeah.
the work that you're doing is just so important. And so,
Well, I really am grateful that I feel very honored that you asked me to join your podcast. And I love the work you're doing in the world, Arnie.
oh, thank you.
Yeah.
And there's a link to your website somewhere. I'm not sure where they put it. And, so you can find out about Kim's work and see what's there. There'll be a link to me. And if you want to book a session with me, then there's a link to do that as well. So again,
Yay.
thank you so much. And I look forward to talking to you more, and all the best with your work.
Thank you, Arnie. Really appreciate it.